July 7th, 2010, a date that would forever be etched in the annals of Los Angeles history. A scorching summer day in Los Angeles. The sun blazed down mercilessly, casting long shadows and creating a mirage of heat waves that danced off the asphalt. The air hung thick with humidity and apprehension. It was the kind of day where every breath felt laboured and the weight of the atmosphere pressed down on the city. That's when the LAPD finally caught a break in a case that had haunted them for decades. A case that had left a trail of sorrow and unanswered questions. They arrested Lonnie David Franklin Jr. at his home on 81st Street. The quiet neighbourhood was suddenly thrust into the spotlight as news of the arrest spread like wildfire. This seemingly ordinary garbage truck mechanic was no ordinary man. By day, he fixed the city's garbage trucks, blending into the fabric of everyday life. But by night, he transformed into the notorious Grim Sleeper, a predator who prowled the streets, leaving a trail of fear and devastation in his wake, a name whispered in fear. The Grim Sleeper was a spectre that haunted the dreams of many, a shadowy figure whose very mention sent shivers down spines, a name synonymous with terror. His reign of terror had etched itself into the collective consciousness of the community. For over 25 years, the Grim Sleeper had terrorized South Central Los Angeles. His crimes were a dark stain on the city's history, a reminder of the evil that lurked in the shadows. He left a trail of victims, mostly young African-American women. Their lives, full of potential and promise, were cut short by his heinous acts. Their lives cut tragically short. The community mourned their loss, each victim a stark reminder of the Grim Sleeper's brutality. Their families left with a void that could never be filled. The pain of their absence was a constant ache, a wound that time could never fully heal. His arrest was a cause for both relief and outrage. Relief that the nightmare had finally ended, but outrage that it had been allowed to go on for so long. Relief that the killing had stopped. The city could finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that the monster was behind bars. Outrage that he had eluded justice for so long. The community demanded answers, questioning how such a predator could operate with impunity for decades. His capture marked the beginning of a long and arduous journey to uncover the full extent of his crimes and the systemic failures that allowed him to operate with impunity for so long. The investigation would reveal not just the horrors of his actions, but also the deep flaws in the system that failed to protect the most vulnerable. Lonnie Franklin Jr. was an enigma, a man who lived a double life so convincingly that even those closest to him had no idea of his dark side. He was a master of disguise, not in the literal sense, but in the way he presented himself to the world. He was a chameleon who blended seamlessly into his surroundings. In the bustling city streets, he was just another face in the crowd, someone you wouldn't look at twice. His ability to remain unnoticed was his greatest weapon. By day, he was a familiar face in the neighborhood. He would wave and chat with neighbors, always ready with a smile. To them, he was just Lonnie, the friendly guy next door. He worked as a mechanic, fixing cars and collecting scrap metal. His hands were always busy, and he was known for his skill and dedication to his work. People trusted him with their vehicles, never suspecting the darkness that lay beneath. He was known to help neighbors with odd jobs. Whether it was fixing a leaky faucet or helping with yard work, Lonnie was always willing to lend a hand. His helpful nature made him a beloved figure in the community. He was even seen as a friendly and dependable member of the community. People felt safe around him, never imagining the horrors he was capable of. His charm and friendliness were all part of his carefully constructed facade. But beneath this facade of normalcy lurked a monster, a predator who thrived in the shadows, waiting for the cover of night to reveal his true nature. The contrast between his daytime persona and his nighttime activities was stark and terrifying. When darkness fell, Lonnie Franklin Jr. transformed. The friendly neighbor and skilled mechanic disappeared, replaced by a cold and calculating killer. The night was his domain, and he moved through it with a chilling purpose. He became the Grim Sleeper, a name that would later send shivers down the spines of those who once knew him. His reign of terror was marked by long periods of inactivity, lulling the community into a false sense of security before he struck again. A predator who stalked the streets of south-central Los Angeles. His hunting grounds were the dark, deserted streets where he could operate without fear of being seen. The city that never sleeps became his playground. His victims, mostly vulnerable women caught in the throes of addiction and despair, became his prey. They were easy targets, often overlooked by society and left to fend for themselves in a harsh world. Lonnie exploited their vulnerability with ruthless efficiency. He lured them with promises of drugs or money. His approach was calculated, knowing exactly what to offer to gain their trust. Once he had them in his grasp, there was no escape. Then he silenced them forever. His methods were brutal, leaving no trace of his presence. The women he targeted vanished into the night, their fates unknown until much later. This stark contrast between his public persona and his hidden life was chilling. It was hard to reconcile the friendly neighbor with the cold-blooded killer. The duality of his existence was a testament to his ability to compartmentalize his life. It was a testament to his ability to deceive, to present one face to the world while hiding another. His smile was a mask, concealing the darkness within, to manipulate those around him. He was a master of psychological manipulation, using his charm and friendliness to disarm his victims and those who might suspect him. His ability to control the narrative was key to his success, to hide in plain sight. Lonnie Franklin Jr. was a man of many faces, each one carefully crafted to serve his dark purposes. His story is a chilling reminder of the monsters that can lurk behind the most ordinary of masks. The Grim Sleeper had a pattern. He preyed on women on the margins of society, women caught in the grip of addiction, women living on the streets, women who were less likely to be reported missing, women who would not be easily missed. He would lure them into his vehicle with the promise of drugs or money. Once inside, he would overpower them, often using drugs to subdue them. Then he would shoot them. Sometimes he would strangle them. Their bodies were discarded in alleys and dumpsters, treated like trash, left to rot in the unforgiving California sun. His crimes were brutal, they were calculated, they were the work of a predator who derived pleasure from the suffering of his victims. A predator who treated human life as cheap and disposable. Section 4. A city held hostage, fear and frustration in the shadow of the sleeper. As the body count rose, so did the fear. A pall of terror hung over south-central Los Angeles. Women were afraid to walk alone at night. Families lived in a state of constant anxiety. The Grim Sleeper had become a terrifying spectre, a grim reaper who could strike at any moment. The police were under immense pressure to catch the killer. They formed task forces, they chased down leads. But the Grim Sleeper always seemed to be one step ahead. Years turned into decades. The case went cold. Many feared he had vanished, disappeared into thin air. The frustration was palpable. The community felt betrayed by the system that was supposed to protect them. Section 5. Justice delayed, systemic failures, and the long road to accountability. The Grim Sleeper case exposed deep flaws in the criminal justice system. It wasn't just a story of a single criminal evading capture, it was a glaring example of how systemic issues can allow such horrors to persist. The fact that he was able to operate for so long, undetected and unapprehended, pointed to systemic failures. These failures were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger, more troubling pattern. Failures that disproportionately impacted marginalized communities. There were missed opportunities. Opportunities to connect the dots, to listen to the voices of those who were crying out for help, and to take action before more lives were lost. There were mishandled pieces of evidence. Critical clues that could have led to an earlier arrest were overlooked or not properly analyzed. This mishandling wasn't just about incompetence, it was about a lack of priority given to the victims. There was a lack of communication between different law enforcement agencies. Departments that should have been working together were instead operating in silos, leading to crucial information falling through the cracks. And there was a pervasive sense that the lives of these women, mostly black women trapped in poverty and addiction, simply didn't matter. Their disappearances and deaths were not given the urgency and attention they deserved. The Grim Sleeper case became a rallying cry for change. It galvanized communities and activists who demanded accountability and reform. They took to the streets, held vigils and organized rallies to ensure that these women were not forgotten. It forced law enforcement to confront its own biases and shortcomings. Training programs were overhauled and new policies were put in place to address the systemic issues that had allowed the Grim Sleeper to evade capture for so long. It led to the implementation of new protocols and technologies like familial DNA searching, which ultimately led to Franklin's arrest. These advancements were crucial in ensuring that such a lapse in justice would not happen again. But it also served as a stark reminder that justice delayed is often justice denied. The long road to accountability is fraught with challenges, but it is a journey that must be undertaken to honor the victims and prevent future tragedies. Section 6. Echoes of the Sleeper. A legacy of loss and the fight for systemic change. Even with Lonnie Franklin Jr. behind bars, the Grim Sleeper case continues to cast a long shadow. The scars of his crimes run deep. The families of his victims are left to grapple with the unimaginable loss. The community still bears the weight of the fear and trauma he inflicted. But from the ashes of this tragedy, a flicker of hope emerged. The case ignited a movement for change. It forced a conversation about race, class and justice in America. It highlighted the urgent need for a criminal justice system that protects all citizens equally.